Okay, so our first video is going to cover ecology. We're going to introduce and review some terms that you guys should hopefully be familiar with, as well as apply some of the laws of thermodynamics to ecology. So if y'all remember from your freshman year, remember ecology is just the study of their organisms and how they interact with the environment. So that's what a lot of our unit is going to be based upon, how the organisms interact with one another versus how they interact with the environment. So as a little reminder, remember you have abiotic versus biotic factors. Remember your biotic factors are your living things, where your abiotic factors are your non-living. Remember back to your freshman year vocabulary list, A is not or without, and bio was life. Okay, so remember some examples of your biotic factors. These would be obviously anything living, your plants, your animals, bacteria, remember those play a huge role in the ecosystem. Fungus, any of those things are biotic factors. Where your abiotic factors would be things like water. You could count your chemicals there, like carbon dioxide availability, oxygen availability, nitrogen. Sometimes weather is factored into abiotic factor, climate. Okay, wind would have a temperature. All of those are going to have an impact on how these organisms are interacting with each other as well as the environment. Okay? And these factors are going to dictate who's able to survive where. Okay? Let's say, for instance, you're talking about a marine environment. So now you need to take in salinity, okay? So the amount of salt that's in the water, the amount of dissolved oxygen that's available in the water, the temperature of the water, and any other factors there, and those would determine what organisms are able to survive in that particular body of water. So let's look at another example involving these interactions in the ecosystem. We're going to be doing a lot this unit with graphs and being able to analyze the graph and pull information from the graph and draw it. And so we're going to kind of start that right now with this example. So if we look at this graph here, we're graphing both sea urchin populations, limpet populations, and then you're tracking the seaweed growth when those are present. And so what we have here with our various lines, you can see each line is labeled for you. Okay, and so you've got your control, where you have both urchins and limpets present. And if you look at the seaweed growth there, it's very small. Okay, then when you remove the limpets, okay, it still remains very small, virtually non-existent with the growth. Okay, your best scenario is to remove both the limpets and the urchins. Your second best scenario then is to remove the urchins and for the limpets to stay in place. And these are the kind of things that seem very simplistic and very straightforward as we're looking at this and we're talking about this. Oh, and those are the things, though, that you need to be able to write down on a piece of paper. If I gave you a graph, or if your AP test gives you a graph that's like this, you need to be able to put it in those simplistic terms. You know, that the most seaweed is able to grow when both limpets and urchins are removed. The removal of urchins is more important has a bigger impact on seaweed growth than the removal of limpets. Okay? Those simple conclusions you need to be able to draw from looking at a graph like this. Also, as we go through this unit, keep in mind that your biotic and your abiotic components go hand in hand. They are not two separate things just because one is living and one is non-living. The abiotic components have a huge impact on those biotic components. Okay? There is no way the biotic components are going to survive without the abiotic ones. If you look over here, you're talking about things like the sun, okay? Minerals, water, gas like carbon dioxide and oxygen. If these things are not able to interact with the biotic components, then your biotic components then are no longer going to survive. Okay, so all of these conclusions that you'll be pulling from graphs and readings, okay, you need to be relating both of those things together. How the abiotic impacts the biotic, how the biotic could impact the abiotic. Some vocabulary that you guys should hopefully be familiar with and remember. Okay, obviously we've got an individual, that's just going to be one organism, and then we've got our next step up will be a population. Remember, a population, they're members of the same species. Okay, and they live in the same area. And remember that a species is able to interbreed with one another. Okay, our next step up then would be the community. The Community is going to be all of the species, all of the different living organisms in that particular location again. Up from there, we've got our ecosystem. Okay? Remember, your ecosystem includes your biotic and abiotic factors. So your community is limited to your biotic factors only. Your ecosystem is when you bring all of those together. Now you're talking about the soil, the water availability, as well as the plants, the animals that are located there. Okay? In between these two, in between an ecosystem and a biosphere, okay, you may see what's called a biome. Most of you guys are familiar with most of the biomes. If you were in my class or Ms. Luger's class, y'all did projects on, remember, the desert versus a tundra versus a deciduous forest. Okay, so your biome is going to be your group of ecosystems that are going to have a similar climate and community. Okay, for instance, a desert biome has similar climate, okay, and similar types of organisms are able to live there. Okay, your biosphere at the very top includes the entire portion of the planet that supports life. Okay, so basically the entire surface of the planet that is able to support life. So as we go through this unit, you may hear a couple of different types of ecology kind of tossed around there. So the first one that you may hear is organismal. Okay, and so this is going to be our study of physiology and behavior as the organisms are interacting with the environment. Okay, so here, like I said, we're looking at the physiological, the behavior changes as it's interacting with the environment. Because remember, that's all part of the ecology. The population ecology is when you're looking at the factors that are impacting the population as a whole, not just one particular organism. We looked at those more in your freshman year. We looked at more population ecology. Community ecology, you'd be looking at how the organisms are interacting with each other as well as the living, as well as the environment. You see this a lot with your competition. When we talk about symbiosis, all of those usually get lumped into community ecology. So with that, they're interacting with each other as well as the environment. And then last year, ecosystem ecology. This is going to look at the ecosystem as a whole. So here you're looking at energy flow, okay, as well as chemical cycling. Like for instance, following carbon through or nitrogen through the abiotic and the biotic reservoirs. Okay, so with your organismal ecology, again, you're looking at the changes in the physiology and the behavior as the organism is interacting with the environment. Population ecology, you're looking at the individuals, the factors that can impact the population, the large number of individuals in that area. Community ecology, how they're going to interact with each other as well as the environment. And then your ecosystem ecology would be that whole energy flow. This is where you bring in your thermodynamics, your biogeochemical cycles. So let's look at some examples of the different kinds of ecology. Okay, so let's look at this guy here. Okay, so I have a trout, which as you can tell is a fish. Okay, and so if we were talking about how this trout is going to select a mate, which kind of ecology would that be? So hopefully you told me that that would be organismal ecology. So that would be a behavior as it's trying to look for a mate and interact with a mate. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Okay, so now we have this rainforest here. Okay, and so in looking at this rainforest, what if we were talking about the productivity of photosynthesis in this rainforest? Okay, so its ability to, basically its ability to do photosynthesis. Okay, so that one would hopefully, you guys would tell me that that would be ecosystem, because that's definitely energy cycling, abiotic, biotic factors coming together here. What if we're looking at the same rainforest now, and one of the things the rainforest is famous for is its diversity. Okay, and so we're looking at what factors are going to influence that diversity. Okay, well, that one would be community then. Okay, because we're talking about how all the living things are interacting with one another. Okay, so now that we've reviewed some of our ecology terms and kind of thought back as to what everything means, we're going to apply the laws of thermodynamics to ecology. Now, I know some of you guys have never had these before. A lot of you will talk about these in physics, and obviously I'd say half of you haven't taken physics yet. You may remember these from middle school, but we're going to try to apply them a little bit to the biological systems. So the first law of thermodynamics states that energy or matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. Okay? This one is also sometimes called the law of conservation. You may remember it that way, the law of conservation of energy or matter. Remember, anytime you see a capital E, that is energy. Okay, so in biology, we're looking at what's called an open versus a closed system when we're talking about these energy transfers. Because if energy can't be created or destroyed, it is going to, when it changes forms, and a lot of when we're talking about ecology and biology, a lot of times it's going to transfer also. It's going to go to a different organism. It's going to go out into the environment. So an open system is one where the energy is exchanged between the system, so maybe the organism, and the environment. That's what is considered an open system. Okay? So, for example, a plant that's absorbing energy from the light, and it's going to convert that into chemical energy. Okay? That's an energy exchange between the environment and the energy system of the plant. When energy is released as heat, when organisms do metabolic processes, that's an energy exchange between the organisms and the environment. So an open system, those exchange matter or energy between the systems and the environment and the organisms. Okay? A closed system obviously would not. Okay? And our biological systems, like I said, they are going to be open systems. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of this open system. Yes, I know that these are two different bears, okay, but just go along with it. Okay, so if we're looking at the bear and its interactions with the environment, if you look at the first one, okay, there is definitely a conversion of energy here. Okay, the bear is going to, from the first one to the second one, the bear is taking this chemical energy here that is found in the fish. Okay, so it's going to take in that chemical energy. Its body will break down that chemical energy, okay, and it's going to convert that chemical energy into kinetic energy. That's the energy it's going to use for it to be able to run. Okay, and so that would be a change of the form of energy. The energy was not created so it could run. The energy was not destroyed from the fish. It was converted from chemical to kinetic energy. Think about a plant. Okay? A plant is going to take light energy and it's going to convert that light energy into chemical energy. It's going to convert it into glucose. Okay? And so that, again, it's not destroying the light energy. It's not creating glucose from scratch. It's converting that light energy into chemical energy. So our biological systems are open, and they adhere to this law of thermodynamics, that the energy or the matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. That's why when we do a lot of our metabolic processes, we release all that heat, because heat is a form of energy, and that energy cannot be destroyed. And so we basically release that excess energy as heat. So our second law of thermodynamics states that energy transformations cause entropy or heat, or an increase in disorder or chaos. Okay? And when we have this increase in disorder or this increase in chaos, it actually results in a decrease in the energy available to do work. Think about as you're doing that energy conversion, taking that chemical energy and converting it into the kinetic energy so that you can go run around. And you're releasing all that heat. that heat is unable to do work. It is not in the form of energy that's able to do work. So when we do these energy transformations, especially in these open systems, it causes entropy or an increase in disorder, which again, like I said, decreases the energy available to do work. Okay, so entropy in general, entropy is going to be our measurement of disorder or randomness. You'll see this on graphs sometimes. They'll measure the entropy. So chaos, disorder, randomness, you can use all of those to describe entropy. And this is results in the physical degradation of the organism as it ages. You can see that entropy happening. Think about people. Okay? As we age, as we get older and older and older, we start to physically degrade and break down. There's an increase in disorder and chaos in our cells, in our DNA, that results in those physical manifestations of appearing old. Think about a building that receives no maintenance, an abandoned building that nobody's taking care of. Okay? Over time, that building starts to degrade, okay, because, again, of this increase in entropy. So really the only use for this entropy, this excess heat, okay, is to warm the body. And as many of y'all know, every organism doesn't even do that. Okay? It's only for organisms that maintain their body temperature. They have a uniform temperature. As most of y'all might have learned in elementary school, quote-unquote warm-blooded organisms. Okay? They're called endotherms. Okay? An endotherm that needs to maintain its temperature is going to use this heat, this entropy that's released during these chemical reactions. Okay? Otherwise, it's just going out into the universe. A spontaneous process. Okay, so a spontaneous process is one that can occur on its own. You know, if something is spontaneous, it wasn't planned out, okay, you're spur of the moment. So a spontaneous process can occur on its own. And if it can occur on its own, then it does not need an energy input because it can occur on its own. Some examples might be rust. Okay, rust or an explosion. Those do not require an input of energy to occur spontaneously. Okay? If it's going in the universe, in these open systems and in our energy systems of the universe, for something to occur spontaneously, it needs to increase the entropy of the universe. Okay? Think about rust. Rust physically degrades. It breaks it down. It increases the disorder, the chaos, the randomness. So it is a spontaneous process. Okay? Living systems, so for instance what we are, okay, living systems, they are going to increase the entropy of their surroundings. Because remember, the biological systems are open systems. So they're interacting with their surroundings. So living systems increase the entropy of their surroundings. As we release this heat into the atmosphere, as we release this heat, this disorder, this chaos, we're increasing the entropy of our surroundings. Okay? This is important in its relationship to evolution, as organisms become more organized as they evolve. Okay, so for instance, if you think about the first organisms were unicellular bacteria. So our evolution application here, write in a different color so you can tell I'm talking about something different. Okay, our evolution application here is that as evolution occurs, these organisms become more organized, which actually seems a little bit backwards, right? If we're supposed to be increasing the entropy of the universe and we think that evolution is more of a spontaneous process, it's okay though, because the total entropy of the universe, the systems plus its surroundings, is increasing. So in some ways, evolution sounds like it contradicts this law of thermodynamics. But it does not, because the total entropy of the universe the systems and its surrounding is still increasing, even though the one system is becoming more organized. Okay, let's look a little bit at the application of these laws. So if we look at this diagram here, you can see both of these laws in effect here. Okay, the red arrows here, these are showing energy transformations. Okay, I think one of the ones that's easiest to see is the plants, or plants to the herbivores and the carnivores. You're seeing that transformation in the various types of chemical energy, and you're also seeing all these yellow arrows here that are releasing heat. Okay, so the red arrows are basically adhering to the first law of thermodynamics, that the energy is not being created or destroyed. You can see it cycling through the entire system. Okay, and so as it cycles through the system and it's changing, okay, it also, every time we do these energy transformations, that causes entropy. Okay, it releases heat. Okay, so that's our second law of thermodynamics. So our first law of thermodynamics, we can't create or destroy this energy. We can just keep changing it around. But our second law says every single time that we change it, we are releasing heat and we are increasing disorder. And so you can see both of those things happening. And again, you can see how it's an open system, how all these different organisms and these environments are interacting with one another, okay, to cause this increase in entropy. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, now that you hopefully have a little bit of a handle on these thermodynamics, and we'll try to do some work with the thermodynamics in class, definitely, since I know that's a new topic for a lot of y'all. Okay, let's switch a little bit to climate. Okay, we're going to talk about what's considered a macroclimate versus a microclimate. Okay, again, back to your freshman year word list. Remember, macro is large, micro is small. So a macroclimate would be climate patterns on a large scale. We're talking a global scale, regional landscape, a large area. Could be the entire Earth, the entire biosphere. Okay, you'll see seasonal variations with a macroclimate. Okay, so you can see the different variations on this diagram down here. You can see some of the global circulations and some of the different wind patterns. Okay, so in a macroclimate, it's going to be large enough where you may see some of this. Okay, so you get the seasonal variations. Those increase as you move towards the poles. Okay, so keep that in mind. In the micro, and you also have the tilt of the Earth, and as the Earth rotates around the sun, that can also have an impact on those seasonal variations. Okay, a microclimate would be a very small area, very specific area, like, for instance, underneath a log that's fallen over, and so it's rotting and decaying. That would be a microclimate, a very fine, small pattern. Okay. Organisms have to adjust to this climate to be able to maintain homeostasis. This is that, again, working together with those abiotic factors, trying to maintain homeostasis. We have two kind of basic organisms that are trying to maintain their homeostasis in these climates. It doesn't matter if it's a macro or a microclimate. Okay, they're trying to respond to the abiotic factors so they can maintain their internal environment. We have what's called regulators. And regulators are going to be able to maintain that constant internal environment pretty much despite their external conditions. Okay? It doesn't matter, if it's really cold outside or it's really hot outside. They're able to monitor their internal environment and maintain that. A conformer, so conformers, they allow their internal environment to vary. And there's benefits to both. Okay, for example, a regulator can live in an environment that changes a lot, okay, because it's able to maintain its own constant internal environment, where a conformer is going to need a much more stable environment because its internal environment is allowed to fluctuate some. However, a regulator has to use a lot more resources to maintain its internal environment, where the conformer doesn't have the resource demand on it because it's not trying to maintain this perfectly steady internal environment. The last thing we want to talk about is a little bit with the shifting and the distribution of the ecosystems that's happened over time. So let's look a little bit at plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is the shifting of the plates of the Earth. You can see there's your Pangea 225 million years ago, and as you work your way through here, you can see it shifting and the continents breaking apart. Okay? And as these plate tectonics were occurring, okay, it had an impact on the biology. Okay? If you think, remember from your freshman year, one of the ways we could study evolution was biogeography. Okay? And so if you use biogeography, you can see the impact that this event has had on our distribution of ecosystems. We're going to look at leopard distribution. That's what this diagram over here shows you, is the range, basically the range and the distribution of leopards. And we're going to kind of walk through these, this kind of graphic that can help you determine how a biological species is distributed on the Earth, the ways that it kind of narrows down where it's going to kind of be able to survive the best and settle down and have it be part of its range. The first thing we look at here is the first question we ask, why a species is absent. Keep in mind that this diagram is talking about when things are absent. Does dispersal limit distribution? So basically, you're saying if it does, then that means that the area was inaccessible. Maybe, for instance, when you're talking about the leopard here, maybe it couldn't get over some mountains, or there was a large body of water, or they spent insufficient time, together. When you're talking about the plate tectonics and the shifting, and the leopards were not able to spread as that fast. Okay. So if dispersal limits the distribution, that means there's something going on with there's something going on with the biogeography here. They were unable to either access that land or be able to utilize it for any length of time. If that was not the case, then we're going to move on to our next question. So next we would ask then about behavior. Okay, so does the behavior limit the distribution of this organism? If so, then maybe that's due, like an example would be habitat selection. Maybe the behavior of the leopard, it wants to be able to hide in grass, it wants to be able to climb trees, and maybe it's not a jungle type situation, okay? But behavior could have an impact. So if there was no behavior limitation, then we're going to move on to our next question, okay? And our next question is going to be about the biotic factors. So first we're going to ask about its dispersal, then its behavior, and now we're focused on the biotic factors. If these have an impact as to why, maybe biotic factors have a reason as to why the species is absent. And we're talking about why the species is not in this particular place. These are interactions with other species. And so these could be things interactions with other organisms. So maybe there's a predation issue. Maybe there's a competition issue, parasites, disease. Okay? But these would be biotic factors that could impact why an organism may not be in a particular place. Okay? From there, our next step then would be to look at the abiotic factors. So these abiotic factors would be things like chemical factors, like is there enough water available? Is the water too salty that's there? Is the pH okay? Is oxygen available? These would be things that, remember, these would limit. These could make it so the species is absent. Where these, if it's, is there These also, because we're at the end of our chart now, these could also limit the species. We just have two groups here. We have chemical versus physical factors. Is the temperature right for the particular organism? Is there enough moisture? Is the soil okay for the plants to grow so that the herbivore that the leopard eats can survive? Okay, all of those things are going to factor into the distribution of, in this particular case, the leopard, over these various ecosystems. Okay, so we're going to kind of go through this stuff in class. You will notice that our activities in class are going to focus on the video, as a general rule, on the video that you watched the night before. We'll help reinforce it. We'll help get any questions answered that you had. And we'll do more of the activities, the labs, the writing, the things that will make you remember it, as well as be successful on your AP test.